Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are around the globe. It's Mr. Bill. We're back with the ITAM kitchen today. You know, it's the place where we have chats that unlike you see anywhere else around the globe. It's a lot of fun. And I'm here with Rob Collins. And we're here to talk about the entire trend we've done this month. Let's talk about the inherited environment. As we come in as new practitioners, hardware asset management, software asset management, configuration management, right? We're brought in to do a job. But what else is there behind the scenes that we're not told? Because we get interviewed for the role, but sometimes we're not told all the details of what's going to happen on the role, right? Sometimes you have that dialogue, a little bit, but being able, this is the whole idea, give us scenarios to actually talk through how we think it through, et cetera. And we're on week 4. I mean, Rob, I can't believe we're on week 4. I mean, we've been having a blast with this, haven't we?
Time flies when you're having fun, you know, and these are the kinds of things that we enjoy so much. We're ITAM people, we're puzzle solvers, and we actually enjoy the challenge.
Absolutely. And on that, being able to say, okay, how do we put that forward? Because today's scenario, we're going to dig into this in a second, it's a global consulting / services organization. Some people call it GSI, right? Where we had an American firm just purchase a European firm. It's like, okay, there, you know, this does happen. If you think this doesn't, I don't know where you've been. This is reality. This does happen. So the whole idea is, let's start talking through this. Let's look at that step. Let's figure out that next step. But before we do that, Rob, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll hit the whiteboard.
Absolutely. I'm Rob Collins. I'm an ITAM professional that's been in this business, in this line of work now for probably close to 30 plus years, between time in the United States military as a U.S. Marine, through state service within 2 different government agencies for like 24 years, and then an additional 5 years with private consulting. Back to you, Bill.
Awesome. As I play with my smartboard, there you go. And for those that don't know me, Bill Talbot, also been around 30 years. It's amazing what you run into. Sometimes even college start putting asset tags on stickers on tags, and realize, oh, this is what you're going to do the rest of your life. Not doing tags on assets, but all of a sudden, how are you moving that forward, right? But it's now been a 30 plus year career, kind of like what Rob was talking about, in all sorts of things, having fun. But that's the most important part, is what fun are you having, right? Making sure you're enjoying your journey. And that's the whole idea behind why we're even doing the ITAM kitchen, is because we're bringing fun back in ITAM. Because so often we get stuck in the weeds and we get mundane, et cetera. We forget about, why did we start? What really lights our fire? And we have specific scenarios. And if you've not seen the scenarios from over the last couple of weeks, oh, you've missed it. Oh my gosh. We've had some awesome discussions, right? We've talked about healthcare. We talked about manufacturing, right? Different scenarios there. We've talked, I can't remember the first one. Go look back at my notes. What was the first? What was week 1? What was the week 1 was? It was here too. No, okay. But I can't see what week 1 was. But the whole idea is, we're having different scenarios, and each one were different, right? Different little sessions. And this one is about a global merger and acquisition, integrating 2 different companies, integrate an organization from the U.S. to actually purchase a European company, how they come together, right? So being able to say, okay, how are we going to make this work? Because we have a bunch of tech heads. We'll just call it that way. A bunch of tech heads, a bunch of egos, we have sales too. We have duplicity in some ways and not in others. How do we do this alignment? Because in this case, we're working to figure out, okay, we have lots of tools. Again, we're talking about a consulting and services organization, right? They've got ServiceNow, they have Intune, they have other tools in the EU, right? And the whole idea is we want to integrate within the next 12, 18 months. Oh, well, okay, mic drop. Yeah, you're talking about Sandy. This is not uncommon, though. So, okay, how do we put this forward? But they want to help synergize. It's all about that synergy. It's important, right? Because we'll say it's the cobbler's children has no shoes, right? That's the case here. It's not uncommon at all. Trust me, I just came from a global services provider. Asset management, we'll just say, was not as tight as I was thinking it would be, and question it, and it just kind of went nowhere. But again, I just call for what it is. I'm not trying to name companies or anything. I'll let you figure it out on your own. But typically the services companies say, well, you have tech just as long as you install and you're able to be billable for me, it doesn't matter. That's not uncommon, right? Well, this firm says we need to get our act together, right? We have regulations we need to align with, like GDPR, SOX. There's other employment laws, so what you can share, what you cannot share, right?
That's right.
Also some audit and financial risk. We're tying this, right? Because we got license agreements everywhere because everyone loves Microsoft and Microsoft loves everybody, right? So we also have the duplicity behind that, say, okay, how can we work this a little bit further? We also be able to say, okay, how do we deal with these regulatory gaps, right? Because that's part of, now we have a gap. We just went global, we're just US, et cetera. But we also have audit exposures from these vendors, right? Because the one thing you want to keep in mind, if you don't realize this, okay, and you've probably heard this as a broken record. If you haven't, you're about to hear it because now you're about to hear it. And it's one of those things you hear it once, you hear it from everybody. Is when organizations, software auditors specifically, find out you're going through a merger acquisition and you started putting together. Oh, audit crazy is what they do, right? It's not uncommon. That hasn't changed. We changed screen. Let's do that. Okay, I can make that work. I can make that work.
Okay. It'll focus.
So, is that better? We're all good?
It'll focus in a moment, I think, as you move about. It's just fuzzy right now. But
It's
that's okay.
fuzzy. I'm a fuzzy guy. Oh, okay, anyways, that's a different problem. Anyways, we've got change control we need to deal with. We need to look at some of the manager. We got CTOs that have their needs, right? Then we have CTO wants unification in 90 days. Okay, really? Of course. The CFO wants synergy savings immediately, of course, right? EU leadership says they're feeling steamrolled by U.S. processes. Sometimes it's the opposite is true. I've seen that too. Legal, they're backlogged already on contractual reviews, and they did not. Even though you have two different teams, there's different understandings that they have, right? Mm-hmm. And the SAM and ITAM teams, they're completely stretched and overwhelmed because they're not even the right size. Now, from the size of this organization, what is the size of this organization?
Okay.
10,000 plus employees, multiple regions. Not uncommon, right? That's not uncommon whatsoever. So hold on, let me change the screen.
There you go. It's working on it.
That's going to help her. Okay, let's try that. We'll get the screen till it works. That's good enough. But what today's about is to triage this a little bit, right? So let's get some key points. Let's figure out how we want to triage, because again, this is an initiative we've been brought in to actually say, make this happen. And I'll give an example. Sometimes this happens with internal resources already. That's not common either. I know one time when I was HP, as an example, I was brought in for asset management because we were consolidating 80 data centers into 3 globally, right? Mm-hmm. And I was brought in to say, okay, Bill, you do this all the time. You're going to do this in your spare time. Yeah, okay, right. Anyways, I was traveling, global role, et cetera. Yeah, interesting role. And it was being driven by the CEO of the organization because we needed some cost unification. And so, it happens. That's not. It's not that. In this case, we've been hired or been brought in to actually work this scenario and work this with the teams, because think about it, 10,000 employees, 10,000 plus. Let's say it's 10 to 15, just round number. Mm-hmm. You've got assets everywhere. You have infrastructure in many different places. You have the entire gamut as far as software, right? That's a service provider. I've done outsourcing services my entire career, right? If anybody's back from an old Vanstar computer land, guys, I get it, right? So I was there when all that happened. And part of an outsourcing agreement, that's how I got into this world, right? But internally, Vanstar actually did a real good job. Right? We had a good team, but most organizations don't. That's kind of my comment. But you can think about how we're working this through. Rob, what comes to mind? Because again, to me, it's kind of old hat. It's like, okay, here we go again. It's kind of like there's a whole song behind that actually. Oh, it was Whitesnake. Yeah, there we go.
Right. Well, the first thing that comes to mind immediately is we need some governance over this particular effort. So you should have a standard playbook for standing up a project management team or a program management team, as it may be, so that you can sort of plot, plan, track the entire thing, right? That's at the very top level. And then the second big one for me, because now you're involving acquisitions from overseas, from the European Union, in that environment, you have to get a full understanding of the regulatory differences between business as usual here in the United States and what is being acquired overseas. And so we're going to need some expertise in and around that, either through consultancy or by hiring people within. You mentioned earlier that it sounded like the existing contract management teams and maybe even the IP and legal teams are already like they're full up. There's no availability. Well, if that's the case, then you either have to make some availability or you've got to get a team in there for that. IP, regulatory, all of this, it has to be considered.
In the way I would start this whole thing, back to your point of the governance key stakeholders, right? The regulatories, et cetera, because you have a lot of key players in this. For example, I remember when HP acquired EDS, right?
Okay.
This is real, right? And one of the first things that happened when that occurred was that kickoff meeting.
Right. Yeah, you got to do that. Let everybody know what we're doing and let them know that this is a sanctioned activity. It is coming from the top. And if we say put resources on it, please don't ignore that request. Actually act on this, and then get status on whether or not those things have been fulfilled. You have to have buy-in. Exactly. And now you've got to ensure that buy-in is communicated throughout.
Yep. So when you think about that kickoff meeting, right? So you've got the initiative, you're talking about what it was, Rob was talking about. You had the sponsors, key sponsors for helping drive that. But this is also where you're gonna have those key stakeholders in this room.
Yep.
At the same time, right? Because this is where you're also going to, at the same time, say, here's what we talked about. And over the last couple of weeks, we've talked about this kind of repetitive to a degree, but it has to, it's key, right? Because when you start looking at the people, right?
That's right.
The process.
People's where it starts.
The tech. The data. All driven by the governance. And the way I've always approached it is in this kickoff meeting, you're setting these expectations up front. Because there's different pieces that have to be there. Because there's another avenue as well. Business doesn't stop. So you're billing, right? You have resources, customer calls, you have new PCs still being ordered, you've got reclamation happening, you have software distribution and updates happening. That doesn't stop as you're doing this. You literally have a moving target. It's 10,000 of us as minions. And today, if you're doing something offshore, I was working in an organization, 300,000 people, right? And they were acquiring companies, and we'll say they were struggling. I'll just leave it at that. But I'm not just trying to pick on them. They all struggle, right? Because it kind of gets consumed. Oh, it's someone else's problem, and that's kind of the struggle as a whole. But that kickoff meeting, you're helping identify not just you have these areas, but you're helping identify who's going to perform tasks in these areas, right? That's extremely important. Because when you start thinking about outsourcing services, you have, I'll say IT, right? You have finance. You have services. Then you have management. It's like, oh, is that all? Yeah, but any idea how many people you have within this? It morphs pretty quickly, right? And your IT team still can't spell finance. Where's my spelling for Monday morning? Okay, sure. I call myself out, sorry. But from here, you're also be able to say, okay, what else is needed, right? When you get those key stakeholders in the room, say there's 10 or 20 of you. It won't be 200. That's a little extreme yet. You're going to get to the 200 mark, but you still work with, I'll say the core 10, 15, 20, maybe up to 50 people, depending on how it's organized, to say, here's what's happening, right? And be able to set expectations here. I need you to come back, because what's that first thing we always talk about, Rob, at this point? We kind of talked about that a little bit. The assessment?
Yeah, there'll be some of that. I mean, in so much as from a project standpoint, too, if there are other people you're not aware of that you may need for this effort, there should be some consideration for that. And then there's a number of things too that you're going to assess. Like the first one that we started off with was the governance in and around a regulatory environment in the European Union that has to be considered for all of those entities that are being brought in. And because that was like one of the first things I want to say is making sure that you got a team to assess that. And then
you also have, yeah, and the interesting part here, depending upon where you are, that's the service organization is, the customers. You also need to assess what you're moving or not moving.
That's right. Yep.
Right? Because just the customers alone, that's a whole different dynamic. I'm not saying you shouldn't look at the rest of this. You absolutely should.
Right.
Your customer, if you're working, maybe you have a division that's government, right? U.S. government. You maybe have European government. The two can't mesh.
Yeah.
The
other thing too is, the whole point of this entire thing is you're making an acquisition and a merger so that you can increase the total amount of business. And so absolutely, yeah, you have to take into consideration the customers and also, all those protections for the customers that are present within the regulatory environment there. A lot of that's going to come right back to that just because of the differences between stateside US and Europe.
And where I was coming from on this was you have the resources, and we need to put that out here too, because you also need to assess your resources, how they're being done. But it's being assessed by the customer environment. Again, it could be government, local, whatever, right? In the contracts, those contractual obligations. Again, they cannot be impacted. I'll put a big star in multiple everywhere, right?
Zero impact to current business.
I'll put it this way. If these folks get impacted, there is no business.
Yeah.
It's not so. It dies. The whole idea is dies, right? I'll be morbid on that. Yeah, you can't. You just can't. Yeah. Don't touch those that are actually bringing food to the table. I'll put it that way. Yeah, exactly. But you're doing a similar assessment, and this is where, when you talk about the different resources, I'm scrolling back and forth here.
Right.
IT Finance Services Management, they're going to help you better assess here, because everyone's back to the governance, right? I'm going to go all the way back to where we started. Back to here for that kickoff. You have the team, maybe you just expand that team. That's okay. You're identifying what's here, but business can't stop. Key team owners need to assess this environment. Oh my gosh, I just went from 50 to 200. That's not unusual, by the way. That's unusual. Maybe 100. You try to keep it about 100 because it just gets unwieldy anyways. Let's very familiar with this. Is figure out, okay, what's manageable, and just if you need additional resource, that's great, but they're ancillary, right? You have your key stakeholders, because once you start looking from a triage perspective, they start saying here, that's when you can say, oh, okay, we have timeline. We've been told, we have an executive says, okay, well, I want this done within 90 days. Yeah, okay, right. Well, there might be some movement that you can do within 90 days, right?
You can have a plan in place, let's say by 90 days. That's one thing. And then we're
Well, let's brainstorm that. What is possible within 90 days for this one, Rob? I think that's a great exercise, actually.
Yeah, I think that within 90 days, you could definitely do an assessment of the regulatory environment. That can definitely be done within 90 days. You can set up the initial customer meetings well within the early 90, I mean, within the first 30 days, but this is something that we get to later in the week. Those kinds of things, they can be done. There was a thing that came to mind too. If it was me and I were in the situation, I think one of the first discussions I would want to have and or reports is I would want a debrief around the assessment that led to the decision to actually perform the merger and the acquisition or acquisition, as it were. If I had that debrief in front of me, then that would help me to start thinking around what we need to do, and initiate the exercise, really. Tell me why you decided to do this. Tell me the justification. In that, there should be some expectations. There is a decision to go forward to do it. There must be some expected target in so much as the business goes.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
If you look at the M&A business case, and keep in mind, it might be as simple as actually looking. You probably have some internal documentation to look at. You also have what's in the press, right?
Yeah.
That's help drive that. Because when you look at that, that's going to help box it a little bit further.
Yeah.
And say, okay, here's where it is. You may have to get further detailed at some point. That's great, but at least you have a good starting spot.
Yeah. I want the debrief.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, so what else? We have the plan, the assessment, environment. I'd say we have our key stakeholders identified.
Yeah, for sure. And when you're saying assessment here, are we talking about going through and starting that exercise around hardware and software inventories? What we have there, what we're bringing in?
The high level stuff only, not the detailed.
Okay, that's fine, and then also any contracts, for instance, would need to be considered in there too, current contracts.
Yeah, I doubt you might be able to get a list of different assets, potentially, depending on how well they're doing it.
Yeah.
Your environment contracts, you can at least know that from a high level. Say, here's our assumption, and also assumptions.
Yeah, that's true. So either way, whether they're doing a good job or a poor job or not at all, at some point you're going to have to assess the total inventory of everything so that you can bring it all together and this information off to the finance folks that can give you valuations. And then also another thing we talked about several times before, and that's the alignment between the business objective, the IT support, and the IT asset management support for those things. Those are one of those that should be a given. Are we doing what we should be doing to bring value to the business?
I'm going to throw that in their mission statement too, because we need to look at initiative and we have to refer back to that with our assumptions. The mission statement of this whole initiative, right? It's easily overlooked. That's the reason why I bring it up. Bill, that's motherhood and apple pie, as we say here in the States, right? Well, it is. But you know how often it's forgotten? Like 90% of the time, right? So sometimes you need that. I say also within 90 days, a business case, actually we need a regulation.
Yeah. You need to understand the regulatory environment laws, especially as rapidly as they're changing these days.
Oh, no, stop that.
Yeah.
And I also say, let's start here because one of the results from this, and there's probably additional things. If anybody has any more you want to add to this, feel free to put that in the chat. By the way, if you're listening to us live, please put it in the chat. Say where you're from. Enjoy this conversation. Put additional notes in here. Because what's going to also happen when you see the plan from a high-level plan is you may not have the exact plan. We'll just say high level again. with my scribble. So the base business case, I'll say review.
That's right.
Key stakeholders identified. Your mission statement. You're also going to have a gut check that's going to happen here too. It's something you can't really write down, but it's like, is it achievable? Your key stakeholders, you're going to have that conversation. That's a hard conversation. And you're going to have to say, thumbs up, thumbs down. How are we going to make it work? And say, well, the executive says we're going to do it, so we're going to do it. I get it. But the question is it achievable, right? I know we need to make it happen. I get it, right? So do you have to, what's causing it not to happen is help identify that, which is, what am I thinking of? Risks, right?
Yeah. And either way, it still needs to be communicated. And you'll come up with some things that you can absolutely achieve within these time windows. And then there may be some things that aren't achievable necessarily based on current resourcing. So you're going to want to list those out and present those to the sponsor, the executives that are pushing this forward, and just set that expectation with them. So you can get value. Here's where we can do some quick wins. Here's where some additional time and work would be needed, and you'll get value from this. And then put some other things within this, the management of the scope, the definition and the management of the scope for this whole effort, so that you put that in front of them and just let them know. If they insist, okay, fine, you did your due diligence, you reported it. If things go sideways, hey, they were warned.
Well, exactly. Well, let me back up because there's also something I did forget. I/we. We'll take join on this one. We talked about IT, finance, services, and management. That's both organizations. They're involved with this, right? It's not just one or the other. It's so you have two teams, right? Or one team, but made of both sides, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I put that in there too, because that's extremely critical. We'll look at this. We're good. Nope. On the screen. Oh, that just happened. Okay. There we go. There we go. Because when you start thinking of 90 days, right, what do you, the whole idea is what you can look at. Because again, we're trying to triage, right? That's the goal. That's the sole purpose. What's the truth? What's possible? What's not? When we start looking at the plan, start saying, okay, what else is there? This actually could say, okay, this is actually now 2+ year journey, but here's what we get within the specific time frames,
Right.
because of resource constraints, money, whatever, right? It's not unusual, right? And you also have to see what the cost is going to be, right? That's a cost factor here. It's kind of hidden. I'll say this hidden. Most folks don't realize it even occurs, but there is a cost level of effort when you start doing this. How much time is going to take? What's going to take away from my billing resources? There's a cost we're not really adept to put in this. It's not put in the proposal, yada, yada, yada. There's all sorts of things that happen beyond that, right? And when you start thinking about the cost of effort, that's also going to help you prioritize, right? And the truth behind here is also being able to say, okay, again, what's the gut reaction? What's possible? What's not possible? How can we move that forward? Because there's one thing to have first impressions. And first impressions, by the way, are usually right. It's good. Gut instinct's usually pretty good. But what you have to avoid doing is you'll get all the SMEs, the specialists in the room. They will argue to the nth degree, saying who's right. The egos come out. And you've got to be able to say, okay, guys, really, we need to facilitate this. We need to go through this. Again, it's not being negative, it's just being factual. right? As you're looking through some of that. For example, in this case, from a maturity readiness perspective, just provide a little bit more insight. Whether we do this in the 90 days, the U.S. team is mature, and the European team is informal. Love it. Great. How can we wing it? I love it. Right. And from a process standpoint, they're saying procurement, there's a difference in procurement, how you look at that, centralized versus decentralized. Oh my gosh. Okay. Figure out. Now, do you want a discussion? That's a great discussion to keep on going. You'll have that for months. Technology, there's tools all over. You name the tool, it's inside.
Yeah. So there's going to be quite a bit.
Root discovery. Yeah, exactly.
Rationalization.
Exactly. The data, they're saying it's dirty. That's not unusual. It's a services company. We shouldn't have it because they do that for customers. I can do a whole different one on just that alone. Yeah. But there's inconsistency with asset tags, employee information, how they're tracked, how they're put forward, multiple languages. We don't want to get into service management. We don't even talk about the service management systems. It may be the same vendor as far as the service management product. Doesn't matter. When you start doing like this, everyone has a different approach how they do it. They always do. And that takes months to address. You say, oh, we'll use out of the box. It's like, okay, you want to destroy the company? That'll do it. Absolutely.
Well, I think that there's a lot of alignment exercises that will take place during the course of the effort.
We keep coming back. That's a key word, right? That's a key word to keep. And we've mentioned a couple times. Is being able to say, okay, how can we still try this? How do you work on that alignment, right? Because we're talking with two different teams. We have lots of disconnects happen here, right? So at this point, from alignment, let's talk about the structure of the team a little bit. I think that's a good exercise here, Rob. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah, I think we should.
Right. Yeah, because when you talk about the team, right? We talked about the finance, IT, et cetera, right? But you also have each one of those. Those are kind of like subgroups, right? IT, you talk about infrastructure, right?
Service desk.
Talk about cloud, service desk. Say ITAM.
Yeah. ITAM could be there, could be finance, or someplace in between.
Correct. I just actually, let me do this. I'll put ITAM/IT finance in that part, right?
Sure.
But keep in mind, the reason why I'm helping identify these, we can do this for lots of different groups, right? You have, it could be DevOps teams, it could be all sorts of things, right? It could be your data center teams. That's another one. Right? Not just cloud, they'll have data centers too, right? These are like subgroups to your entire team, right? And you have to think about that too. And I say that being constructive. There was one time I was working on a project for the U.S. government, and we were working on just one application for the government, right? And it involved all this, just this one application. But that was one application, not the rest of the infrastructure for the U.S. government, for this one agency. And I say that because sometimes you don't realize what you're walking into until you walk into it, right? So we start doing the teams. You've got IT and its subgroups. You're going to have finance talking about the billing, right? Well, let's just put that out. Got a little time here. Let's say billing and fixed assets. accounts receivable. Again, anything else come to mind? My brain really just.
Yeah.
You have,
Let me see. Acquisition and contract management.
there you go.
They're two separate things.
Stuff like this. Let me just scroll that over. This would be a service catalog, product service catalog. You talk about vendors, right?
Yeah, vendor management.
I'm telling you, my scribble is just horrible there. I'm having a good time. My brain's going crazy. It says I don't need those extra letters, right? And see, what happens is you, just like you're here right now, you start doing this, you start lapping it all up. They just start taking it all in. It's just all being able to consume. It's like lapping up water, right? It's lots of good things. And these contracts may be from your customers. It may be vendors. I'll say other. So you literally could have services contracts as well, third parties, right?
Yeah, you have to consider those, yeah, in the environment that you're acquiring from.
You do, because when you start thinking about this, the vendor management, procurement, again, we kind of just expand scope a little bit versus what we talked about the initial teams, which happens. That's the whole idea. How can we further expand upon that?
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of team members. I was not kidding. You're going to have between 100 and 200 people when it's all said and done that are involved with this. And now you're starting to see that, right? It's like, but that's also where you need to have the key leaders in each one of these groups helping drive these other individuals. That's what's called facilitation. This is not an asset management task. We're talking about, okay, how are we looking at the bigger picture to go that path? This is something we need to be aware of. That's why we're going through this exercise, right? Because that awareness, typically you don't talk about this. Oh yeah, we'll talk about it, but we don't put it on paper. Okay, well, I just put pen to paper here, right? It's just,
I mean, when we get further down into the weeds,
yeah.
when we get further down into the weeds, those other topics, they are going to surface. Like, whether or not any of these things are documented or not, and then whether or not we immediately need to address that, or if that's something for further down the line. Mm-hmm.
Well, and on that note, that comes all the processes in here.
Oh yeah, that's
because
all
how you doing contracts and the processes, that
Yeah.
to your point, that's all in the weeds. But that's what the team has to work on. That's why these are subcommittees, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have, because if you're going to get a quick assessment, it's like you're there to help be part of the team. You're not here to solve that immediate problem. You're working for the long-term problem, but you need the additional team members to step up. And if you don't know how to delegate, it's time to learn.
Oh, yeah. You have to.
Yeah. The services / delivery team. You're going to have a couple individuals on this on both sides, how they're all working together, from the resources, from the equipment. I'll say resources, this may be people, maybe otherwise, right? I'll say environments. Reporting, typically it is a different group. Again, I'm just doing a quick, Rob, anything else you want to throw in there in any of this, or is there another one?
Oh no.
Perspective.
This
It's just, we're just showing how it morphs, right?
Yeah.
Just be honest.
For the purpose of this exercise, it's very easy to cast a really wide net, But and then, of course, at some point after we've done this, just figured out what we need to go and look and examine and to consider, then we have to have that scoping discussion. And then this will segue into what we'll do in the next session, which is, okay, well, how do we measure this stuff? What activities do we need to take into consideration and begin the prioritization before we get to road mapping? So yes, HR processes and documentation. Any regulatory things around that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not all of Europe, but there are places in Europe where we get basically a month off. It's effectively like a month-long vacation.
Yes, we do. And typically it's all of Europe. Yes.
Okay.
I don't know what just
I
happened.
think it's not a bad thing.
Okay.
Mhm.
Sometimes you never know what's going to do. There you go. So
That's a good view.
that is actually a good view. That worked out pretty well. I don't know if I can write that small. You see my scribble, it gets really bad.
Well, you can zoom in, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But we're providing this insight just so you understand kind of what's happening, right? As an evolution, you're going down this path. It's like, okay, who do we have in play? How are we moving forward? How do we start merging these cultures? Oh, there we go. Thank you. OCM. Organizational change management. And people say, nah, we don't need them. You absolutely need those.
You will need them.
But they're all billable to projects. Like, well, you have a choice. You back them, and you put them full time because this is a full time job for OCM. This is not where they could be in 6 weeks later. No, this is a full time job right now. The communication, this many people in place. People say, again, I mean, Rob, I'm sure you have your own horror stories when OCM's not involved. I know I do.
Good ones, that's especially necessary at one of the places that I worked at in my career. The challenge was to take some form of an authoritarian view on actions to govern things like software. Software asset management is where I was going with that, right? Whereas I took a different approach entirely. It's like it wasn't necessary for us to totally govern all aspects, but we did need to be informed on purchasing, on what they were requiring. And that I was able to get consensus across all of the divisions and offices within one agency, 5,000 people on that. I considered that a win for sure, because once we had that and we had that information coming in, we then had a much cleaner, nearly real-time view of all of the acquisitions. And then from there, we were able to examine, do app rationalization, put in some governance around it. So at some point, there were controls and approvals, but we didn't have to start with that. We didn't have to start with some iron-fisted approach. One of the great lessons that I've learned in my career came from one of the amazing bosses that I had. And she told me, she said, if you can cause the thing to happen using everything in its natural state, right, then it can be on its own. It can run as it is, and you'll automatically achieve objectives that are aligned to that. And I carry that lesson all the way through to today.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what you're going to do this whole process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this scenario says, okay, the U.S. is actually mature in the environment, but the European's not. Well, so some of these processes, it may be just the opposite. U.S. is actually immature, even though the overall maturity of the organization is greater. And the European is a step ahead. It happens.
Yes.
That's okay. There's nothing egotistical about that. It's just be able to accept it for what it is. And this is the other part. Leverage each other's skills.
Yeah.
Leverage each other's systems. Leverage each other's processes to help further refine. That's what the management expects you to do. As a management, okay, we kind of put us in a program management role. We talked about some of this, but let's go asset management. It's like, well, we can't take this all on. You're not. But when you realize the bigger picture of who's involved, then you at least can help facilitate the conversation, saying, oh, now I see what's happening. I see where the handoffs are occurring. I understand the governance that needs to occur. Now you understand who your supporters are, right?
Yeah.
And that's key for this, right? Go ahead.
How do you eat an elephant?
Yep. It's a big elephant.
One bite at a time.
And keep in mind, this is a 10,000 person organization. This easily could be 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 person company, right? A little bit different dynamics usually with that happens, but the same steps have to occur, right? And maybe it's like, okay, to your point, you've got the bigger elephants is consuming the little ant, or I will say that, the small organization, right? So it's like, oh, just do it our ways, and they're horrible. They're horrible. I just gonna call it out. They're horrible, right? I've seen time and time again. It's like, well, we just went back like 10 years compared to what we had. I mean, I saw that even for sales systems, right? It's like sometimes you have to accept it for what it is, because there's some other decisions you have to make later as far as you being part of this organization. But that's a total different topic, different time, different place at that point in time. This is more about the triage. Okay, where are we? So, my gosh, we're coming to time. This is great.
Here, sure is.
As we look at this, right? Mm-hmm. So as we work on refining this, Rob, what comes to mind from a final nugget or something we need to add to what we have so far here on screen?
We've covered so much. We've uncovered so much. I'm saying, really.
We have. This is a lot. This is a master class on this. Yeah.
A final nugget on this one, I think, is once you've sat down, sort of like reining all of this in and identifying and prioritizing and scoping and setting expectations. What can we take from this to begin the next step in so much as that goes? And I think that is a serious discussion that has to be had at a very high level around all of this.
I think you said a key word in there I did not have on the screen, scope.
Yep.
Within 90 days, we'll know what the scope is. We'll be able to identify it. We'll identify some of the schedules.
At a high level, we should be able to do this within the first 30 days, and we need to. So much to consider here. And where are you going to get that value from? Like, you'll need to know the inventories. You're going to get value from that. You're going to need to know the various different vendor management systems. And if you can determine, which won't be now, but later on, what's working and what isn't, that's going to be like a 60-day thing, I think. You can get some preliminary stuff within the first 30 days, but that's going to be a 60-day sort of like activity that'll drive the further execution of the plan.
And the thing that happens here, the resources we're doing this with, this is an important part. I'll make these final nuggets. Is this in addition to their day job? They're doing this, right? You've got operating business. People are doing their financial, they're doing ITAM, they're doing seem to be, and they're saying, okay, now you need to work our internal systems up, everything. And this adds just to like 2 other jobs to what you're already working on. So your workload is going to crazy, and you may say it's not for me. If that's the case, nothing against you. Just say, raise your hand and say, I can't do it. Step up with it. And don't be surprised if all of a sudden you're replaced. I'll just go ahead and call it that way, with another person or have an additional team member. That's totally their call at that point. There's nothing to get emotional about. It's easy to get emotional because we love what we do. You're just not ready for that role yet. That's okay. And I provide that from a comfort perspective because, I say I just lost my job. They're not replacing you. They're just saying they need to help someone to help lead this effort. That it's just not you. You're not ready for it. That's okay. But step up for that versus falling down, because what happens a lot of times is the person is a junior person for ITAM. They're brought into this, Okay, now said to lead this, and they tank. Management gets upset. Escalations go everywhere. You're under scrutiny because you don't have the experience. Raise your hands like, yeah, I just saw a masterclass on this. I know what's about to occur to a degree. I'm not exactly what we're doing, but I'm not ready for this. Just be honest with it, right? That's also going to help you with your own conscience say, you've got that off your chest. Just like, what's going to cost me my job? If it does, it wasn't meant. It was meant to be. That's the important. Again, I'm not trying to lose your job, right? But yeah.
Yeah, I have an alternate take on that, right? And that is that if it's still a goal, they still want to do it. There's no point. You're already invested in doing this merger and acquisition, right? So the alternate take on that is, all right, well, maybe if you don't want to interrupt business and you can't release staff, then here are some ways that we can accomplish this, right? We may need to outsource. We might need to pull in subcontractors, if you will, around the consulting on this in order to sort of make this effort go forward. So this way, zero impact to your current business, right? With some minor exceptions, I'm sure, but find ways to do it, but just do it this way, and be upfront about them and say, this is what it looks like from an initial view of what it's going to cost, how many people, how much time, and then sit that in front of them and say, now the decision, of course, is as always, it's yours. So if you don't like the solution, of course, like you're saying, all right, we gave it a good shot, did our due diligence. And I've been part of efforts like that before, and I've known people too that have made those kinds of recommendations, and they did, and management disagreed, and it was obtained in writing. Everybody walked away from the table clean, right? Nobody was fired. They were all retained, right? It's just that they decided at that time, this is an effort, while valuable, we can't pursue it immediately, but it's on the table for some later period.
Exactly. And so as we come up to the close on this, so thanks for those additional nuggets there, Rob, because you're right. We have got to look for multiple different scenarios, and sometimes you do need outsized resource to be more objective for you when you're doing this. It just happens. It's like, well, it's additional cost. That's called an M&A cost. That was already planned and utilized at least 10% of what the acquisition cost is. Well, that's high. It might be 5, but whatever. There was a number in there. If they said 2% or 1%, they were nuts. That was a whole different. That was a bad deal, but it's different. But where I was going with that is being able, as you think about this, right? We're triaging, trying to understand what it is. That's what we're doing. That's all this is. That's all this is. Actually, we have different team members we'll work with, but you see the multiple team members going multiple directions, right? Because when you come back for the congruence, that's also where your sponsorship comes into play, right? Your CTOs, your CIOs will definitely be involved with this. It's like, well, I've never talked to one. You're about to. You're a critical part of that team, right? This is that opportunity for growth. So you look at this, because on Wednesday, hopefully you can make Wednesday session. We're going to do stabilization. So how do we take this and say, what's good enough for now? How can we stabilize and say, let's at least move the parts so we're coming closer together. What can we do or not do? And then on Friday, it's going to be the 30, 60, 90-day planning, right? So, okay, what's possible in the next,
right?
We might go beyond that, but 30, 60, 90, we might say what's going to be in the next 12 months. Actually, we might do that today. That's not a bad idea. This week, I'll spin that up a little bit. Let's do it on the fly. There you go, making commitments. I love it. Is being able to say, okay, what's the bigger vision we have for all this? Because that's also important. But today was about the triage. Today was really about understanding the teams. Today was about that kickoff and figuring out what that next step is. Because when you start dealing with a large services organization, and I'm not saying this is true for other M&As as well, it is. But for a services organization, there's a lot of idiosyncrasies behind that, and something to be aware of. There's always going to be a surprise. This is where you get thick skin, right? Thick to nth degree, right? You're always going to have surprises. You're going to have new team members come up and say, oh, well, why wasn't I not included in the beginning? Well, maybe they've not been on the radar. Maybe no one knew they existed. Well, I'm making $1 million of profit. Yeah, a $20 billion company, that's small. But I'm not trying to say you're not important. I'm not, but it's like I didn't know you existed. So let's try to get you to play catch up.
Right.
This is where over communication is also going to be key. That's why we have OCM. We need OCM the full time, not just part time. and be able to say, okay, let's keep ourselves on point. We have the problem statements. We know our mission statement. How we put this forward. We're identifying where those risks are. We're looking at the bigger picture, saying, okay, here's where it is. Here's what we can do today. Here's what we have to do tomorrow. Just because it is what it is, right? So with that, thank you, Rob, again for a great discussion. This has been phenomenal, right? On so many different levels. From Monday morning, we're doing pretty good. I mean, we just jumped right into it, talking about mergers and acquisitions, see how detailed we can get, just trying to triage and say, what's our next step? Mm-hmm. So I thank you, Rob, very much on that. And for myself, I'm Mr. Bill, and I appreciate here with ITAM Kitchen. If you want to know more about the co-op and be part of organization, things like this all the time, look at the IT Management Co-op. Hey, just look at my link and hey, you need to be part of a community. It's it. Oh my God, we have a lot of fun. So look at that. Have a blast. Have yourself a great week. Now we'll see. Rob and I will see you on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Indeed. Thanks, folks.